Thank you everyone for joining us for this Maximizing the Soil in Your Wildlife Food Plot webinar. My name is Catherine Garcia and I will be the moderator for the webinar. Let's go ahead and get started. Just to tell you a little bit about us while we're waiting on everyone to join in. In 1959, AgSource was formed to serve Wisconsin dairy farmers. What began as a regional dairy records processing cooperative has now grown into the AgSource of today, serving industries that span the entire agricultural ecosystem, from cutting-edge soil, plant tissue, and water testing to agronomic consulting and full-service DHI lab testing. AgSource, at its core, is a source of truth. One test at a time, we help our clients make the best decisions, always grounded in data. AgSource delivers quality, timely, and accurate analysis, providing valuable information and innovative solutions to improve decisions and profitability of members and consumers. I'm excited to introduce our speakers for this webinar, Casey Robinson, Chris Clark, and a special interview with David Holder. I'd now like to turn it over to Casey to get us started.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Casey Robinson, and welcome to Maximizing the Soil in Your Wildlife Food Plot. As an avid hunter and outdoorsman, I'm always looking for ways to increase my odds in the field, bring wildlife onto my properties, and provide much needed nutrients to the animals I love to watch and pursue. I have found that over the years, wildlife food plots achieve just that. In today's topics, Chris, our guest speaker, David Holder, and I will be discussing biodiversity, deer and turkey habitat movements, wildlife needs, where to establish a plot, plant species, and most importantly, soil testing. It is important to know the needs of wildlife and what your property should contain in order to attract and hold said wildlife. To begin, I will be discussing habitat and the needs for deer and turkey. Biodiversity. To have a strong wildlife population, a property must have healthy ecosystem. In order to have a healthy ecosystem, you must have biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of life in the world or in the particular habitat or ecosystem. Biodiversity can also help protect soil, keep its fertility, and protect freshwater sources such as ponds, creeks, and water holes. White-tailed deer have three basic needs: water, nutritious forage, and cover. The most critical of these three is water. Deer get their water source from three major sources: vegetation, metabolism, and surface water. Vegetation may contain 10 to 75% of water, which all depends on plant, temperature, and time of year and amount of rainfall. Metabolism is the breakdown of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins inside an animal, which also releases water. Deer rarely meet their water needs solely on vegetation and metabolism. A good deer habitat has a reliable and accessible surface water source. White-tailed deer are ruminant herbivores. Ruminants means that they have four-compartment stomach. They require a variety of nutritious forage for growth and reproduction. Their diet changes as plants change seasonally, but shoots and leaves of woody browse are a major staple in their diets. Plentiful deer habitat should provide all three preferred food types, which is forbs, mast, and browse. Because forbs produce better in open areas, the habitat should contain brushy and open areas with 40 to 60% in clearings. The two most critical seasonal periods for white-tailed deer are summer, when adult females are lactating and bucks are growing antlers, and late winter, when food quality and quantity are low and the mast of oaks and other trees is scarce. It is during this time period that food plots are most beneficial to deer. Although they eat a variety of foods, they selectively forage for high quality, palatable, and easily digestible plant parts differently given the season. Spring and early summer, naturally occurring deer browse is high in protein and complex carbohydrates. Fall and early winter, body fat stores are increased with a variety of mast crops such as persimmons and acorns, which are a good source of carbohydrates. Another crucial part of whitetail's range is cover. As you may know, deer use cover to protect themselves from predators and weather. Usually the very browse that attracts them also serves as cover for them. If you've ever hunted a mature buck, you learn very quickly that they tend to hold up in some of the thickest cover and have ways of moving about the timber almost undetected. Mature bucks are masters of their terrain and prefer properties with abundant cover to bed and escape danger. Having a good abundant cover can also aid in does and fawns in the spring. A third of the buck's mobile personality, but A third of the bucks have a mobile personality, but we cannot neglect the 2/3 of the population that are sedentary. For example, buck 256 was collared in 2017 to 2018 and has a sedentary personality. His home range is about 510 acres, which is a little below average for bucks with his personality. These are his GPS locations during the hunting season. A couple of noteworthy points. Although he liked to hang out around egg fields, mostly soybeans, he rarely stepped foot into the middle of the field in broad daylight. He spent 6 times as much time in the fields at night than during the day. When he did venture into the field in daylight, he usually stayed in the brushy drainage or a pocket of hardwoods. Research on buck movement shows that bucks change the areas that they use and when they use them based on hunting pressure. And this is just another example. If a deer is nocturnal where you hunt, try moving off the food plot or egg field and closer to the bedding or travel corridor with good cover. It is also observed that in areas pressured by hunters, does continue to frequent the field. When it comes to time for rut, having a source of food that draws does in and keeps them there significantly increases your chances of pulling a mature deer into the open during daylight hours. Under relatively good habitat conditions, whitetail bucks have an average home range of 640 acres or 1 square mile. Whitetail does usually have a much smaller home range of about 300 acres. Now that we know a little bit more about whitetail, let's talk about another popular wildlife species, the turkey. One of the best ways to know that your property has biodiversity is the number of turkeys on your property. Turkeys require a wide variety of their habitat to meet their needs. This variety aids in breeding, nesting, and brood rearing in fall and winter. Wild turkeys generally move a mile or 2 in one day, depending on habitat and distance between food and water sources. The annual home range of a wild turkey varies from 350 to 1,300 acres and contains a mixture of trees and grass cover, according to the NWTF. The weekly home range during brood rearing is less than 75 acres. The total summer home range is 250 acres. Open areas are typically used for mating. In about 80% of observations, hen and gobbler mating occurred in vegetation 4 to 8 inches tall. During nesting, turkeys need screening cover nearby, usually about 3 foot tall. Suitable habitat can be found in openings in woods, along wooded roads, and edges between grass and woods. Trees are important to poults for shade, escape cover, and shelter from rain. Poults begin roosting about 2 weeks old on limbs 6 to 9 feet above the ground. At 4 weeks, they are strong flyers and can go into higher trees. During the first 8 weeks after hatch, 3 essential habitat elements must be available within a small area. Plenty of insects for the poults to eat, cover allowing turkeys to forage frequently during the day, and cover to hide poults but allow hens to spot predators. Now that we have a better idea on the habitat and what deer and turkey eat, let's now discuss factors on when deciding where to put your food plot. Food plot locations have a few factors that dictate where one is established. Soil type and fertility, access. Access is important because you'll likely need to enter and leave your plot undetected and leaving behind minimal scent that will spook deer from coming to your plot. Another consideration is the prevailing winds. Where does the wind typically come from can help you narrow down a plot location that you can hunt more, working with the wind and giving discreet access. Close to cover. As we've discussed earlier, big bucks and turkeys like cover to feel safe, and they would prefer to do as little movement as possible between cover and feed. This should also be a factor to consider when trying to find a location for your plot. Seed variety. Seed variety may be one of the most important factors in a food plot location. You can have the best seed in the variety in the market, but if your soil and fertility are not suited for that seed variety, all your efforts could be in vain. One way to ensure that the seed has the best head start is to take a soil sample. Learning the fertility of your property soil can aid in plot placement, seed varieties you are able to use on your ground. Other factors to consider. Number 1, available daylight is a major consideration in food plot placement. While some plants and shrubs tolerate shade, most do not. Don't be afraid to open up a forest to add a plot to create edges. Number 2, use soil maps to help choose food plot locations, avoid dry ridges, deep sands, and heavy clays. Unless waterfowl is the target species, do not plant in areas that routinely flood. Number 3, locate near cover and or water. Number 4, consider the lay of the land and do not locate food plots on sites that may erode. And number 5, plant perennials on sites with the best soils and annuals on sites with lower quality soils. It is important to keep in mind that although your intentions of a plot may be for the hunting season, offering a year-round option will ensure that the wildlife is drawn and held close to your property, as well as supporting their needs to grow throughout the season. You don't have to be a hunter to benefit from food plots. Now that we have taken a look at wildlife needs and habitat, let's dive further onto food plot forage options and soil testing with Chris Clark.
Thanks, Casey. So many important points that you explained about what is needed to attract wildlife and how to arrange the bedding and cover and the food plots themselves and any water on or nearby your property. I'm Chris Clark, a certified crop advisor with AgSource Laboratories located in Wisconsin. I've been with AgSource since 2011 and sell the plant tissue, soil, manure, water, and lab tests, as well as the field services for a team of coworkers who consult farmers and do GPS soil sampling, precision ag, crop scouting, and mapping. To everyone listening, you are all my people, because to us, hunting isn't just something that we do, right? It's become a part of who we are. I literally can't stop thinking about hunting while I'm at work during the hunting season, deciding which bow stand to hunt from based on the wind or an impending cold front, or going to look for shed antlers in a new part of the national forest. But today we're going to be talking about planning new food plots, renovating current ones. So let's get into how to kick your food plots together and bring in David Holdner as well for some of his responses to food plot questions. First, I want to take a few steps back to explain that there are both spring plots and late summer or fall plots. Spring plots mean you're like the farmers that are planting in the springtime, which would be March, April, or May, depending on what state you live in. Fall or late summer plots are those that you plant in the late summer to take advantage of less weed pressure, heavy dew, and rainfall that could be a little bit more dependable in the forecast. Plus, you're going to be able to provide fresh new vegetation to wildlife. The size, either big or small, is all based on the food plot goals that you have and your surrounding habitat. But when you decide to install your first food plot, you will become aware of that you will have to embrace the inner farmer inside you as you go through all of the steps to nurture and care for your plot, from seed bed preparation and tilling and disking, fertilizing and liming, plowing and weed control, planting and mowing, and then eventually harvesting an animal. Earlier in the presentation, Casey shared how it's actually protein food sources that drive animal movement through the calendar outside of the breeding drive. So what is the goal of your food plot? To have protein sources in the summer for does that are feeding fawns, or plots for antler growth in bucks. How about food plots to keep does in your area during the rut, or to create a food plot for late winter to create body fat storages for animals? Here's why protein. 16 to 18% of protein is likely needed to maximize antler size. Weaned fawns will require up to 20% of protein for optimal growth. And an effective food plot program consisting of annuals and perennials can ensure the availability of forages with more than 16% protein. The good news is there's a lot of options, and that's what wildlife really likes, options. Next, I will discuss some of the general groups of forages that you will see on the packaging or in seed mixes that you could purchase online or from a store. Plus, when they are typically planted, either spring or fall, as well as some of the protein percentages. I'm also going to mention some of the desired pH ranges for you to kind of keep in the back of your head as we move into more of the information about soil. Number 1, perennial forages. Perennial means that these plants can survive several years given good nutrition and the proper weather requirement for your area. They can be frost seeded or planted in late summer. Majority of perennial forages have a range of 17 to 35% protein. An example would be perennial clover. This is a plant that consistently attracts deer and provides up to 35% of protein. Clovers are also one of the great food plot options for the first time food plotters to use. pH of 6 to 7 is ideal. This food plot does grow rapidly, so it will require regular mowing. Number 2, legumes. This is a group of plants that can produce their own nitrogen, but they still could use a little bit of extra nitrogen based on your soil test at planting. They have protein ranges of about 20 to 30%. Examples include soybeans and alfalfa. One note is that alfalfa does like a higher pH than normal at 6.5 to 7, while soybeans can tolerate 5.8 to 6.2. Both of these you can plant in early fall, or some of them, the alfalfa you can plant in early fall, whereas the soybeans you should plant earlier in the season. Number 3, brassicas. If you've been researching food plots, you probably have heard of this common family of plants in food plot world. They're planted late in the summer with a protein ranges of 22 to 31%. An example are radishes. They produce bulbs that bore and break up hard and compacted soil. They are annuals, which means they only live 1 year, and they can provide up to 20 to 40% protein. And they like a pH range of 6 to 7. Number 4, small grains. These are all typically annuals, and they do wonders for weed control, and they're very easy to grow. They have a protein percentage that's a little bit lower at 10 to 26%. An example is oats. Oats are really high in sugar content, which means they have really great attraction power for both deer and turkeys. Sugar also provides calories that animals need to store body fat. Oats can be a favorite all season long, and you can plant them in late summer, and they typically have a protein percentage of 15 to 26%. Oats can tolerate a lower pH of 5.5 to 7. Some other food plot options: sunflowers. Wildlife both love sunflower seeds and the leaves. What about pumpkins or squash? I have a coworker who has a very successful pumpkin food plot. The seeds contain the most protein. They're very high in energy and very digestible. They tolerate a 6 to 6.8 pH. What about adding fruit trees and nut trees that are native to your area? Deer love apple trees and acorns and other forms of mass, which Casey talked about. But both of our trees do not like pH that is much higher than 6.5. So be sure to contact your local food plot experts in your states and discuss what options you have locally. Be sure to follow the directions on the seed bags for approximate date, as well as depth and the amount of seed per acre, because sometimes more isn't better. The seed will just be competing with each other. Do wildlife food plots even need to be fertilized? Absolutely. Just like every farmer out there, they would not put a corn seed in the soil without having a soil test first. All growing things need nutrition, and food plots are no exception. Without fertilizer, your food plot will not produce to its full potential. That means it won't reach that in protein percentage. In areas where nutrients are weak in soils, usually the antler growth is less than where soils are more nutrient rich. Good human and animal nutrition all starts with the soil. So don't guess, soil test. Using the Plotwise soil kit, you'll be able to obtain an exact prescription of the lime and fertilizer for your unique soil. The Plotwise lab report will tell you what you need to feed your soil each year until you change it to a different crop type. It's actually really easy to collect your own soil sample from your food plot. Here are some steps to follow. You'll head out to your land with a soil probe, a garden trowel, or some type of spade shovel to be able to collect the soil. You'll walk in a zigzag pattern throughout the food plot area. No soil sample should represent more than 5 acres. So if your food plot is bigger than that, divide it in half or into different sections that are about 5 acres each. And you'll do the same thing that you see in number 2 in each of those areas. You will typically stop at each dot and dig down about 5 to 7 inches deep. If you do have a current food plot and it has an area that isn't growing really good, it's a suggestion to take 2 samples. One from the area that is growing poorly, put that into a soil bag, and then one from the area that is doing good. And then you'll be able to troubleshoot what comes back on the lab report of how you can correct the poorer area. Fill up the soil bag to the fill line that is on the bag. It's about 1.5 cups worth of soil. You'll fill out the accompanying soil sample form and then mail both of these to AgSource Labs. Here's what the AgSource plot-wise soil report looks like. The experts of AgSource have picked out the perfect analysis package for a food plot soil analysis. They include, going down the left side, pH, nitrate, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, organic matter, soluble salts, cation exchange capacity, calcium, and magnesium. Also, the good news is they put them in order of importance from top to bottom. At the top of the report, it shows some of your client information and the sample ID and information. The middle of the graph is where you need to focus, and this is what is needed to help you correct your soil. First, always look at pH. If you happen to be on a budget, because fertilizer and lime amounts can be somewhat large on different soil types, if you look at the pH and then find a crop that meets already that range, that pH range that you have currently. Typically, a pH of 6 or higher opens the door to many different crop choices. Second, after pH on your lab report, look at the 3 nutrients that crops need in the most of. This is in the green box where you will see nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Shaded in orange is your unique prescription of lime and fertilizer that is needed for your soil and the crop that you have chosen. For this example, they need to apply 630 pounds per acre of lime for the desired pH to be a little bit closer to 6.5 before planting this crop. They need to apply 65 pounds per acre of nitrogen. This is also best to do some at planting, and then if you're able to, do a little bit after planting. So we would call that a split application. For phosphorus, they need 10 pounds per acre, and also to your benefit to do that before planting or at planting. And then 65 pounds per acre of potash or potassium that you can do beforehand and mix that into the soil or do a little bit at planting. Showing this recommendation section to your local fertilizer co-op, they will be able to get you what you need for your food plot. So just take your report into the one that is in your area, and they'll be able to utilize this information. Just below the green box is the organic matter percentage. This gives you a little bit of an idea of how much water your soil can retain and the nutrients that it is able to recycle itself. Most soils that we see at the laboratory are between 3 and 5%, but a slightly lower number could actually be normal for a sandier soil. This lab report shows a result of 1.9, which is a little bit low. In order to raise organic matter percent, you could add composted manure, till in an old food plot instead of burning it down with chemicals, or planting a crop as a green manure and just mixing it into the soil. The next one down is soluble salts. For salt-sensitive plants, the critical value is between 1 and 1.5, so it's a pretty narrow window. If the soil is sandy, the lower the value in the range applies. Generally, high salt levels are associated with soils that have poor drainage conditions. On this report, the result was 0.5. So usually soluble salts are not a problem in Midwestern states, but the further that you move west and south, this is an analysis to watch. Cation exchange capacity. We have a lot of farmers, and perhaps maybe I'll convince some of you food plotters to start using the cation exchange capacity result to determine if it's a good choice to put a food plot there or not. This lab result for cation exchange capacity gives you a rough estimate of what your soil texture is. The lab result on here shows it's a 16, which means it's a sandy silt loam. The lower the number, that means that it is a lighter, coarser, or sand type soil. The higher the number, that means you have a more clay type soil. Clays can hold on to water and nutrients easier than you can on a sandy soil. So it's a little bit more forgiving if you are a first-time food plotter. Calcium and magnesium are the final two on this report. Anytime that you apply lime, both dolomitic lime, you're adding both calcium and magnesium. And usually in Midwestern states, these levels are in optimum. Next, let's get the insight of our guest speaker, David Holdner. He's the founder and CEO of Raised Hunting TV, Raised at Full Draw, and Raised Outdoors, which plays on the Sportsman's Channel. Welcome, David, to the webinar, and we're glad you're here, and we're really excited to hear your insights on wildlife food plots as Casey asks the question.
Well, David, thank you for joining us today. If you don't mind, would you tell our audience who you are and who you're associated with?
Sure. Thank you guys for having me. My name is David Holder, and we produce the television show Raised Hunting. That's probably the biggest portion of the Raised name that people recognize. Show's been on the Outdoor Channel now for 9 years. We're actually filming now for our 10th season. But then the other side of us is Raised at Full Draw. We conduct camps for kids across the nation. We're in 6 states now, going to a 7th next year. So we keep our hands pretty dirty, I guess you'd say, if we're talking agronomy here. So,
sure, very good. Well, to start, David, I've got just a few questions for you. I'll start with the first one here. What are factors do you look for when putting in a new food plot? Any tips? And then how do you decide where to put or locate that food plot?
You know, I guess for us, when it comes to, and pretty cool that I can answer this one from something really timely, and that is, we've had some food plots that I've had now for 8-9 years. So it's not a decision making, we go back and put those back in. But I had one that wouldn't perform. We could not get the soil right, couldn't get everything. And I think one of the things is a lot of direct sunlight on that particular spot. I moved that site 200 yards maybe, but I'm now on the east side of the field so that the field actually gets some more, there's more trees and things like that, so it's more shaded. And so it holds a little more moisture, and already I'm seeing a way better opportunity. But when it comes to us picking where we're going to put food plots, typically that depends on, one, does the farm need it? Do we think we can have the animals benefit from what we're doing? 2, do we need it? Can we benefit from having a food plot there in order to put the deer maybe where we want them? And so we're looking at all that kind of stuff. We're in the CRP program on some of our properties. So we work with the state and what we should have, not just for deer, but for other wildlife as well.
My second question for you is discuss how to utilize a soil test and the results for your wildlife food plots. What nutrients do you focus on and have on the most successful plots, and why?
For us, I don't want to go, I'm not the agronomy, behind the scenes that you guys are. So I rely heavily on my co-op as to tell me what do we need. What I can tell you is that everyone should understand pH level. I mean, at a bare minimum, you should understand that you need to be somewhere around that middle of the road. We're looking for a 7, and most of the, almost every seed, I think, bag that I've ever looked at tells you that you don't want anything less than a 6, nothing greater than an 8, or they recommend not even bother with planting it. And then the other one, though, that I would kind of put into that category is fertilizer becomes something that is huge for us. I for several years, I planted now, and again, I say I don't know a lot about it, but we do put in potash when we need to. We'll put in lime when it calls for it. But again, I typically am not the one to read the soil sample. I'll take it to the co-op. They'll tell me, hey, this is what you need. And then a guy can order a cart, or you can do it by bags and put it in, hand crank it in. However, I try to tell everyone building food plots is almost like taking on a whole new kid. I mean, you go back and you start watching these things, you want to see them grow, and but if you love deer hunting or you love hunting in general, to see that first animal utilizing something that you planted is pretty cool. So being able to use that stuff, the information that you can get though, but I would say most people probably, like in my case, are not going to be that savvy when it comes to it. And so they're going to rely on their co-ops. That's where they'll get most of their answers as far as what they need to put in.
Was there ever a time in your hunting career that you did not use food plots? And then how did the food plots change your hunting? Did it add to your success and overall health of the wildlife, or what were the changes that you saw there?
Boy, I mean, so many. I'm 54 years old now. I don't mind sharing my age. I've been hunting since I was 6 or 7, deer hunting since I was 10. So for 40 years, there was no food plots. I hunted public land. I never owned my own property. I didn't have a place I could put one in. But for the last 10 years, we've heavily been into, it was something I always had an interest in and always wanted to see, would it do that? Would it have an effect on the animals? Would it make a difference? And year one, probably not so good when I grew a whole patch of velvet leaf, so, but after that, I started to learn, I started to understand soil samples, and working with a co-op, I started to talk to people in the industry and ask them, what should I be planting? And what am I doing wrong? And what chemicals should I use to kill things that are still good for the environment, things like that. And before long, I had my first or second successful food plots. And immediately, when your kid calls you and says there's 25 deer in a 1 acre food plot, you've done something right. It's not just randomly the deer showed up there, that they might, they were all there. And so, when he comes back with the video and shows me all these deer in the food plot, I'm like, okay, this definitely has an effect. So I would say it's had a greater effect exponentially year after year. We keep getting, more strategic shapes of our food plots, sizes of our food plots, what we put in our food plots, all depend upon now what we want to accomplish on that farm.
So when you say successful food plot, how do you gauge that?
For us, a successful food plot, one is that it produces. We don't want just something that, and like I said, I produced a whole half acre or 3/4 acre plot of velvet leaf one year because I didn't know the difference. And I mean, what came up looked perfect to me. And then it just was nothing but weeds. So success for us now is growing the actual vegetable that we're trying to achieve. Now, I would tell you success is exceeded when you have a volleyball size radish or turnip, or you have a squash that's, I don't know, the biggest one's probably been 18 to 24 inches long, so that would be a huge success. But a lot of times we don't get to that, nor do we necessarily need to for the deer. I'm looking for a really good plant itself. I want to see that the material that I can feel in my hands and that I can touch is soft and palatable, and I want to be able to tell that the deer are eating it. But I also definitely want to pull some of those out of the ground and make sure that I do have turnips, that I do have radishes, that we use a lot of brassicas here in Iowa. And, a successful brassica plot will be one that's standing 18 inches or better, in my opinion. And I'm notorious for probably over planting a little bit. So sometimes I don't get the height, and I think a lot of guys do that, where understanding when those plants start coming up, if you have space between them, it's better because they can get very large. The plants themselves can get big. And so leaving some room around them, sometimes your plot may look like, oh, it's not all that much, until it really has a chance for it to grow. So there's a couple different ways of gauging it. You can gauge it by the plant itself or by the vegetable that it's growing. And then others might gauge it by how many deer they shoot off of it. I guess there's a number of ways to look at that.
Is there any advice that you would give someone interested in putting a plot? What are some key factors to consider for first-time food plotters, and what are the common mistakes that they can avoid?
Well, the common mistake would be watch the videos that I've shown where you don't want to grow a bunch of weeds. Number two, I would say don't be afraid to make a mistake. I would bet that a lot of people out there, number one, the cost of the seed has gone up, the cost of the fertilizer, But spending, and don't worry about how big it is. I mean, if you spend, you just start small, plant a 1/4 acre food plot, something that you can manage, that you're not having. I have a tractor, so that helps me. I have a UTV that I pull a ferminator behind. So there's multiple different things that you can utilize. But when I started, some of the plots I did by hand, just got a rototiller and went out there and tilled this ground up, and went back and forth until I got what I wanted. And the thing I tell people, if they're not sure what they want to plant, clover, in my opinion, is probably one of the easiest things to start with. And it's a perennial, so they'll get a few years worth out of it. Having that being said, it doesn't mean you never have to touch it again. You got to come back and mow that clover off. You want to take the flower. As soon as it starts to flower, then it's not as palatable. It's not as good for the deer as what it will be when you mow it. And then also it won't get as thick. The more you mow it, the thicker it gets. And those were things that I didn't understand as in getting started. The root system underneath a food plot is as much as what we see above. And so once I started to learn that, I think it's kind of cheating now, because everyone can Google or go. I mean, you can find this information right at your fingertips. And even 10 years ago, but 20 years ago, it was much tougher. You weren't able to find that kind of information. So I think there's a plethora of places out there to find the tips, just like this. Here we are doing something that someone can come on here and hopefully, hear someone say, because I knew nothing. I mean, the best thing I ever grew was grass in my yard, and I started from nothing, and now I'm managing probably anywhere from 8 to 12 acres of food plots a year, which may not sound like a lot compared to a farmer who's doing hundreds or thousands of acres. But I promise you get 8 to 10 acres of food plots in the ground, and you'll find yourself with more than a part-time job.
Very true. Yes. So for where you live and hunt, you already expanded on brassicas and clover. Is there another type of food plot that you like or prefer, and why?
Boy, the one that I guess, I love brassicas. Brassicas are kind of the family of the radishes, the turnips, but the one that I go back to that is the only reason I probably don't plant it is as much as I do the other stuff is because there's so much of it naturally, and that's soybeans. Soybeans can be fantastic. And so a lot of times what we'll do is we'll work with a farmer to see if he'd leave an acre or a half acre of beans. And then you don't have to put in your own food plot. But some of the other things, the one that I still don't understand why nobody is directing, and maybe I'm sure there's a reason for it, pumpkins. I don't know why that they don't have a food plot that is pumpkins, because deer absolutely devour pumpkins. They like them when they're on the vine. They like them after people have carved weird faces on them and throw them back in the field. I have watched deer cross a field to go across clover and everything else to go eat pumpkins that someone dumped. So I don't know why that one's not there. But the other ones that I probably, everything that we look at, we're typically looking at something. One of my favorites, I guess, now that I think about it, it's called Booner Buffet by Antler King. And what it is, it's an alfalfa and a clover mix. And I never thought about planting alfalfa, really. Again, that's another one that's around a lot. However, we discovered in the last couple of years that the deer will go back to an alfalfa field even in late winter. And I didn't think they would. I thought, like everything else, it's green for a certain amount of time and then it's over. Well, I don't know if the alfalfa is just that healthy and mixed in with the clover, but boy, we've seen them come back to these Booner Buffet plots. So that would be kind of a secret weapon, that I would tell someone. And alfalfa is not too tough to grow either.
Right. Yeah, that'd be a really great one for late season if they keep returning that.
Yeah.
You bet. Well, so the last question I've got for you is kind of your last remarks, really. What else do you want to share with any hunters about food plots, whether it's putting them in or when to hunt them?
I would tell someone that as much as hunting is addicting in itself, a guy goes out or a gal goes out or a kid goes out, and when they see an animal come, especially that's what I think I love about archery hunting, is it allows me to see them and experience them, hear them, smell them, because a lot of times you can't get a shot until they're extremely close. when you have food plots in the ground and those animals are in those food plots, it's that times 10. And I don't know how to explain that to someone until you plant it yourself. And I've been doing it now for 10 years. I've been planting food plots. And just yesterday, I'm out looking at a food plot just to see if it's been growing. Well, I was there 4 days ago, and what I'm doing is I'm looking for, do I think that there's anything that's in there that's hurting it? There's a reason behind it that I'm trying to take care of the plot, but more than anything, I just love to see it go from barren brown ground to that first germination, and you got these little green things popping up. And then one day you walk out there and you look and the whole thing's covered in green. And then you get that rain that you've been waiting for, and you fertilize. And next thing you know, this plot is 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches. Now it's a foot thick, and deer are standing in it. And it's something it's almost as addicting as hunting itself, I think. It truly is. And again, I would tell someone, don't be afraid. You don't have to go big for that to happen. It could be something really small. You could have 1/8 of an acre just in the right little spot, and you plant that in there. Now, it's not magical. It's not going to make every deer in the country come to it. But at the same time, the first time that a deer does walk over to it, you have moved that animal. You have deliberately done something that made that animal do something else. And then a big one for us though is that I love to be able to go back and say, I think our deer are healthier in the winter. I think our deer are having twins and things like that, all because of something that we've done for them. Not as yes, we're trying to shoot some deer, but a lot of times our goal is to shoot 5 years old or an older deer. So it's like we're feeding them and helping them get to maturity and be healthy when they are mature. Especially you get animals out here, we'll see them, they get wounded, whether they get wounded in a fight with another deer or whether they get shot, and see them live through it, and I'd like to think that partially that's dependent upon us helping them. So a lot of reasons for that.
Absolutely. Well, and as a bow hunter, I could see the allure to that. I mean, just putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, when you finally get that mature buck, I think adding a food plot is just that next level, that next piece of the puzzle. And when it all comes together, I mean, you made it happen. You made the right decisions, right calls. So I could see that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you, David, so much.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Really great questions, Casey, to drive home the food plot key points from today. And thank you to David for all of your really honest responses and your food plot expertise. It really is encouraging to hear someone that started knowing nothing can really just start small and grow more and more each year and improve their techniques and continue learning about food plots. So overall, our summary today is think about what is the goal of your food plot. We know that wildlife likes variety, and take a look at how you arrange your water sources, your forages / food plots you cover on your land with the different hunting stands that you have. A lot of crop options are out there, but protein is what is driving the wildlife movement throughout the calendar year. Let your soil test reports guide you for what your soil needs for the crop that you're planting. If you're going to switch your food plot crop, take a new soil sample and then follow that prescription. Enjoy and have a safe and successful hunting season. Make sure that you take a kid or a new hunter along with you on your next hunting or food plot adventures as well. The AgSource PlotWise kit is an easy way to make, or it has made it easy for you to be able to do your soil testing. You can go online at kits.agsource.com to obtain the wildlife food plot kit, and then it comes with directions to refresh your memory on how to take a good representative sample from your food plot. It comes with the supplies that you need, the soil bag, the prepaid mailing label, and the box to send it all back to the laboratory. If you think of any questions after the webinar, here's our contact information, and feel free to send us the questions that you may have. Or if after you've gotten your soil test report back and you need a little bit more clarification, we can definitely help you answer some of those questions. If we do have any agronomists in attendance today, you can self-report this presentation for one CCA, CEU, and crop management. Once again, thanks for watching and signing up. Please also be watching for a follow-up email, which will include the recording in case you want to watch this again or share this event, as well as we're going to share some additional resources to keep on hand. And then a short survey will pop up when you exit so that you can provide some feedback about this event. Kate's going to come back on and ask any questions that are in the chat box.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. We did have a couple questions come in, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Chris, I think this question is more directed towards you. What are the key steps when starting a new food plot?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like a blend of everything that you heard today, is like really paying particular attention to the site location. So you can pull a couple of soil samples and look at that CEC, and that might be a driving factor. You heard David talk about sunlight and how important that is. So don't be afraid to take down some trees. If you're in a really wooded area like I am in northern Wisconsin, sometimes you just need to get rid of the woods and have some of that open area, because all these food plot crops that I talked about, sunlight is so very, very important to success as well, almost as important as water and then fertilizing and liming it. So getting those lab results back from those different sites, looking at your lab results for the pH levels, and then kind of looking at what different options you want for the food plot crop that you're going to put in. There are some really good mixes out there. So if you have a mix, look at the top 3% of what those crops are and still make sure that your pH is in that right zone. You're going to clear the trees and mow the area, and then following product labels, you're going to spray and then do a weed kill. You'll probably wait 1 to 2 weeks again, and then spray again for anything that has popped up after that. So once again, work with your co-op on chemicals. If you have like grassy things that pop up or broadleaves, sometimes it's helpful to take pictures if you don't necessarily know the differences between the weeds, and then take that to your co-op, and then they'll have a better understanding of what product you might need to be able to spray. After you've done your spraying and your a little bit of some disking and mowing is look at your lab report for what was prescribed for lime and fertilizer, and then put that in as you're tilling up your food plot as well. And then check your seed for the proper planting time. So the bag will give you an idea if that's going to be one that should be in the spring. We've got a lot of food plots getting prepared and waiting on for that next fall rainfall event. It's been a little bit dry, so if you can try and time that with a rainfall event, that works really, really good to kickstart your seed in the food plot. And then after planting, usually within 7 to 10 days, you should see your seeds germinate and start coming out of the soil. So revisit your food plot, and then you may do some additional split applications, especially nitrogen after planting, and then a little bit more weed control afterward. So that's kind of some new things for a started food plot.
That actually perfectly leads into our next question. The question from Russ, how do you manage weed control? And the question really is just weeds and weed control.
I guess I'll just continue a little bit. Is I know like David said too, is you want to be somewhat friendly to the earth. I'm not opposed to not using weeds, but there's something about just really well-timed mowing that can do a lot to control weeds after a new plot. So if you did the right stuff at the start and you did a good burn down, you got rid of that stuff early, then you can come back. And where I live, as long as by the first week of July, if I have done a mowing, I've prevented a lot of any volunteer weeds that may have gotten through from going to seed. And the more that I can prevent them from going to seed, the less that I'm going to have next year. And then once again, just work with your local co-ops, because there's so many different chemicals out there. There isn't one that's going to work for everything. So every situation is different, and just utilize your experts. That's what they're there for.
Thank you so much, Chris, Casey, and David. That was all of our questions. We appreciate everyone's time today. Like Chris mentioned, if you have any questions following the webinar, please feel free to reach out to Casey or Chris. Their phone numbers and email addresses are on the screen. We appreciate everyone's time today, and we hope you have a wonderful day.